me, please. When you first started working with a knife, how old were you?
Um, as far as learning to use a knife, I was very young. I grew up, my father hunted, and we cut up meat and did things like that, and learned to sharpen knives and take good care of knives from a very young age. Um, as far as the martial arts, I was around 16, and a friend of mine got me started in the martial arts with some video programs and teaching me on his own. And then I bought my first book and DVD, my very first martial arts DVD and book. Well, actually, it was VHS back then, on Eskrima, knife fighting. I was really excited to learn, about the knife, and that's kind of how I got my start.
Why did you start teaching knife
Well,
fighting?
initially, I taught myself. I watched a video, and I had a book that went with it that outlined each movement, and I had to learn, my own movement, and then I would teach my brother, and he was my first training partner, so, I would show him what I had just learned, and we would work it together. As I started into martial arts, um, I began teaching at the school I trained at, and the knife was just something I enjoyed, and it brings out so many qualities. I used it from the very beginning and kind of taught it throughout, all my programs.
How do you start teaching your students?
Well, back then I started with just knife sparring, like knife dueling. You would start with the knife in your hand, and you're both moving around and just sparring, dueling with the knife. That develops a ton of attributes, and it's still a very good training method. Now I teach it more from a practical standpoint of what they would be likely to have to use it for, and kind of progress from there.
Could you mind to share with us five main principles that underlines in your system that you are teaching?
Um, the biggest is mindset. To me, the mind leads everything. Once you make a decision to do something and you've determined to do it, you can do almost anything. So, understanding how deadly a knife is, how dangerous it is, the consequences of using it, um, understanding how durable the human animal is, um, what your goals are with the knife, why are you using it, what are you using it for, and, being mentally prepared to kill, because if you pick up a knife, our ultimate goal is to not have to hurt anyone. If we can, we train the martial arts out of love for our family, our country, whatever it might be, not for hurting others. So, if we can just cut someone's hand as it's coming towards us and they'll go away, then, that's a win. But anytime you pick up a knife to use it for self-defense, you have to be mentally prepared to kill with that knife, because that's what it may come to save your own life. So the mental part is huge for us. I have a few more things. Do I need to pause so you can talk, or should I just keep rolling?
Could you mind to share with us about your system?
Yeah, that's one of the things I want to mention is a few more principles. You know, Besides the mindset, a big aspect is resistance. We want to be dealing with a resisting opponent, so we have to train that aliveness into whatever we're doing. And resistance doesn't mean all-out sparring or having to kill, trying to really hurt each other. You can resist each other without, going to extremes. As long as you're not allowing the person to do what they're trying to do, you're resisting them. You don't have to hit each other full power or anything like that. Another major principle that we use with the knife is accessing. The knife doesn't do you any good if it's not in your hand. And I know I started out with the knife's always in your hand, and you're going from there. You're doing the Filipino martial arts or dueling, whatever, and that's great. But to actually get the knife in your hand is a big aspect in real self-defense. So that's something we work on a lot. Defanging the snake is a big principle that we use in knife fighting. Economy of motion, understanding anatomy, and a big thing throughout all my material is forward pressure. When we get that opportunity to move in and do what we need to do, we need to be aggressive and look for that opportunity to drive forward and attack. So a few ideas.
Do you have any certain tactics and strategy in your system?
Yeah, like I talked about, defanging the snake is a big aspect and something that we teach as a fundamental. It's just safer if I can move back and cut whatever's coming toward me. I have a much higher probability of not getting cut myself, as opposed to having to close to a medium or close range. And if I can get that cut on the arm or the hand, and that dissuades the attacker, then it's a win-win because now I don't have to kill anyone, and I've stopped the attack hopefully. Trying to think of other specific tactics. I mean, like I said, the accessing is a big part that's come about over the last 7 or 8 years. We've developed just getting the knife into the fight after it's already began. I may be in the clinch, I may be on the ground before I realize I need my knife. Multiple opponents come along, things change, and now it's much more difficult to access that weapon when you're being just tousled around in the clinch, much less pinned on the ground. So, we really try to focus on that and make sure we're able to bring the knife to bear or gun or whatever weapon we have in the middle of the fight. There's so many others, but that's all I can think of offhand.
How do you think does psychological preparation is important for the person with working with the knife?
I think it's critically important. I think it's the very first thing, because like I said, the mind leads everything else. If you don't have the mindset to use the knife or defend against the knife, you're not going to win. Inmates, I work in a maximum security prison. I'm an investigator, and I deal with felons that most of the time they don't have the skill, they have the will to use that weapon, and they come out on top. It doesn't take a lot of skill if you ambush someone and you have if you're determined to kill that person. But the same thing goes if you're using the knife for self-defense. You have to be mentally prepared to use it. You have to understand that if someone else had a weapon, you could get cut, you could get hurt, and you have to make up your mind in advance that you're going to deal with that. You're going to continue to fight, and you're not going to give up. So to me, yeah, the mindset is absolutely number one.
How do you think? What actually pushed people that they decided to start working with a knife?
I think a couple things. One is that the deadliness of the knife. I think people could see themselves winning with the knife. I think people realized that if they had that advantage, that they would have a good chance of surviving, of winning, almost any fight. I know for me, I know that when I have these tools, whether it's a knife or a gun, that I have a better chance of winning against a younger, stronger opponent, against multiple opponents, to be able to defend my family against a wider range of threats because I have these tools available to me. I think another big reason is people see they're scared of the knife. It's something that they're afraid of, and they should be. It's wise, and that fear drives them to go and learn about defending against the knife. And from that defending against the knife, part of that is learning to use the knife. The more you can learn to use it, the better you're going to be able to defend against it. So those are a couple of the reasons I think people go towards that. I wanted to add on the mindset part. Another huge element of that to me is adrenaline, understanding what's going to happen to your body under that stress of a deadly force encounter, and being psychologically prepared for that, so that when you feel weak in the knees, your mouth's dry, you're shaking, you have a positive psychological attachment to that. Say, okay, this isn't because I'm a coward. This is because I have adrenaline going through my system. I have the power, the strength of 10 people. I'm better able to deal with this situation because of this, what appears to be fear or weakness. I don't want people thinking, well, I'm shaken, so I must be a coward. If you develop that positive psychological connection, you can go a long way toward using that, harvesting that power, and really making a difference. And that's where the breathing comes into play. Also, understanding how important your breathing is to controlling your mind.
How do you think why today we have such a situation when exist so many teachers of knife fighting?
Well, I don't know that we have a lot. Depends on where you're at, I guess. I know in this area there are many who do the martial art or mixed martial arts, the sport, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The sport-based martial arts seem to be more popular, at least in my area. As far as why there's so many that teach, I would say it's just because it's such a common weapon. It's such a devastating and effective weapon, and it can be manufactured or improvised almost anywhere. In the prison system, they make weapons, edged weapons of some sort out of almost anything, even in almost total isolation. So almost anywhere you go, there's an edged weapon, and anyone who's really interested in self-defense understands that that's just the reality, and that criminals use weapons. So it would be I don't know what the word for it is, but it would be, I guess, irresponsible in a way if you're training for self-defense to not learn how to deal with that edged weapon, because that's just simply, what people use. I don't know. Like I said, maybe just the practicality of it. It's a very practical tool, a very common weapon to be found anywhere, and more and more people are hopefully realizing that. I suppose some of it is the demand. There must be a demand if there's people doing it. So either people are seeing it in the movies and thinking it's really cool, or hopefully more and more people are realizing that it is practical. It's a functional skill that you need to have. A lot of times people look on the I know from the MMA community, that sort of thing, look at the Filipino martial arts as kind of a joke. They're doing all these advanced drills, coordination drills, trapping drills, and they kind of see that as pitter-pattering around, playing patty cake or playing a game, and that's simply not the case. I think more people are coming to realize that it is a practical, functional skill. Now, I'm not saying the coordination drills should be the first thing you learn. If you're interested in practical self-defense, we have a philosophy of learn it today, use it tonight. And that doesn't mean to go out and do criminal acts, but to be prepared to use some basic skills right away. I want my students to have something they can use before they train for 20 years. If my techniques require them to have 20 years of practice before they can use it, I think I've hurt them if they go out tomorrow night and get attacked. So I want them to have those functional basics first, and then they can progress to the more self-perfection side of things, where you're doing the trapping, the sensitivity, the coordination drills, that sort of thing. But as far as why there's so many, I hope it's that there's a greater demand for it, because it is so practical and intelligent to do.
Today we have such a situation when, for example, one person, he is going to the gym for knife fighting for 3-5 years, but when he faced real situation on the street, he doesn't know what to do. He just has a stupor or freezing. Why does it happen?
I believe that comes down to training methods. Almost any technique could work in the right time, the right situation, with the right person, with the right attributes. But if they haven't developed those functional attributes that they need for a fight, it's probably going to fail. If you're just doing coordination drills and tapping drills and things like that, that's great. But if you never take it to the level of dealing with resistance, of dealing with some aggression, then when you encounter that in a self-defense situation, you're just going to fail. It would be like a boxer who's just hitting mitts all the time. He would develop the techniques of a boxer, but he would never deal, never having sparred or dealt with that resisting opponent, someone trying to hit him trying to hit them, he would never really be a functional fighter, because he hasn't trained properly. So I think it comes down to training methods.
Do you have any certain criteria according to which you can understand who is the real master and who is not?
Well, I mean, if you're I don't know the master part. But if you're looking for a good teacher, somebody can be a very good fighter and not necessarily be a good teacher. So, if you're looking to learn, you probably want to watch those fighters and try to model them. But if you can find a good teacher that's also a fighter, I think you're way better off. So, you want somebody who has the functional training methods and skills. So if you see them dealing with resistance, if you see them or their students actually putting on gear and going against each other with some resistance, even if it's not full contact, I think that would be a good start. You'd also want somebody that encourages experimentation, questioning of the material. If you have an instructor that says, "Well, you can't question me," or if you ask them about something, they say, "Well, you don't question it, you just do it." To me, they're not on the right path there. I want my students to question my material. I want them to test it. I want them to experiment with new things. There's always new things to learn and develop, and they need to experiment on their own in finding what works for their qualities and attributes. I'm a guide that can point them in that direction, but their work is really up to them. So I think having an instructor that's always learning himself, he's out there trying to learn and develop. He doesn't think he's beyond that. I mean, you look at someone like Dan Inosanto, who probably knows more than the rest of the world combined, and he's still out there learning and training and learning entire new arts. So having somebody with that open mind that encourages questioning and experimentation, and who again is dealing with resistance, I think that would be my criteria that I would look for in an instructor.
How do you think, does a knife have some future in 21st century?
Oh, absolutely. No matter how far other weapon systems develop, the knife will always be the most common weapon of opportunity, and it will still be functional. If you have a knife in close distance, it's I won't say it's better. In some cases, it's better than a gun, but it's at least equal to the gun in extreme close quarters. Because of that deadliness of it, you don't have to reload it. You don't have to worry about it malfunctioning. So, no matter how far other weapon systems come, I think there will always be a place for edged weapons and edge weapons training.
Do you have any selection in your system, which students you take and which students not?
Yeah, I mean, we would look for the character of the student. If it's someone who's there to hurt others and that seems to be a little too excited about cutting people up, that's not someone I would teach. Having worked in law enforcement for many years, I know a few things to look for, and we try to keep an eye out for that sort of thing. There are a subgroup, I think, in the knife training world of people that just enjoy the idea of hurting someone a little too much. I've even seen instructors that, it sounds like they're just really enjoying themselves talking about the 20th cut in this area and that area. And, I don't want that sort of person in my school, and I don't want to train under that sort of person. So, yeah, definitely something you got to watch out for.
Which knives do you prefer in your work?
I generally work with folding knives a lot because they're easier to justify carrying in this area. They're legal to carry as long as you're carrying it as a tool and not as a weapon. And it's just a very practical. I was raised with a knife in my pocket at all times, a folding knife, since I was just a little kid. And to me, it's just the easiest way to carry without having to worry about any kind of legal issues. So I work a lot with the folders.
Does it important for you which knife to use, long or short?
No, I think you can be effective with either. For me, the shorter blades are more practical for daily carry. Again, for the legal aspects, if I'm carrying something with a 6-inch blade, I'm going to have to explain why I need that. So, a lot of times it's a 3 or 4-inch blade, And that's our focus, because it is so practical and available to get a hold of. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't train with short swords and sticks and other tools, and we do that. But as far as the practical elements, the shorter blade is much more common.
What you can recommend to the people that just decided to start working with a knife?
Well, one, be safe. Don't mess around with live blades, and get a trainer and whatever you're doing, a training blade. Find a good instructor. I think that would be the key, is to get out there and find a good instructor. There's a lot of good instructional videos out there nowadays that you can get on or buy, and if you have a good instructor, your life will be so much easier. You won't have to go down these long trails into other areas before you find the functional stuff. And know your goals. I mean, if your goal is just the learning the history and the art, by all means do that. There's nothing wrong with that. I think there's a lot to be gained from doing that. If your goal is to have some basic functional skills for your job or for just self-defense, then you need to look towards places that focus on that. In the long run, I think combine them. I teach the functional basics first. I try to focus on that, but then I also do the Filipino martial arts type drills that they're very beneficial, and they're fun, and you can learn a lot from them. So by all means, if you're training for life, the rest of your life, then train it all. Get a little bit of everything. Learn as much as you can.
Could you mind to share with us something more about your own system?
Well, one of the things that I try to use with the stick, knife, empty hand, even firearms, is Bruce Lee's 3 phases of technique. I learned them from the Tao Jeet Kune Do initially, and then the book, and then from different Jeet Kune Do instructors. I've just taken their training methods and some that I've developed and plugged them into those different areas, and it helps me to understand how to functionalize a technique. So the 3 phases are synchronization with the self, synchronization with the opponent, and then application in combat. So it's a model that allows me to take any technique from beginning training all the way up to functional application. And what they are, the synchronization of the self is simply learning the movement, learning the proper mechanics and technique. Synchronization with the opponent is when you start to deal with that timing and judgment of distance, and you develop those other attributes that come with dealing with an opponent. So you do isolation training, timing training, drills that help to develop that the timing that you're going to need for a fight. So you start out in isolation, and then you slowly add tools and techniques till it becomes to the next level, which is application in combat. And that can be full sparring. It could be scenario training. It doesn't have to be again, killing each other, full contact. Someone who's older, who wants to learn how to protect themselves, who has physical limitations, can still use this method. They just have to understand the level of resistance. And that's where, those 3 phases bring about aliveness. We want to work with that aliveness, where we're working with energy, motion, footwork. We're dealing with that resistance. We're moving. And a big part of my system is attribute training. I want, through attribute training, almost anyone can find their path to become a functional fighter by working off of the qualities that they possess, mentally and physically. People are different, and everybody can find that path. I had a friend years ago who was a very big, muscle-bound guy, and he was slow. He was just physically slow. And I was, very fast when I was younger, especially, and I was like 175 pounds. I'd bounce around and move on the outside, cut him up with a knife. But through attribute training, through time, and in developing his visual sensitivity, his awareness, he became a very dangerous opponent for me, even though I was much faster, because he had developed those attributes that worked with his weaknesses. He was slow, but he found other ways around that to be extremely functional, through that attribute training. So those are a few of the concepts that we use that I think can help functionalize what it is you're trying to do.